Then Sports Central, we go for a college football game preview and prediction on the 2023 Orange Bowl matchup between the Georgia Bulldogs and the Florida State Seminoles. A matchup between the powerhouse in college football right now in Georgia, back-to-back national champions. They take a loss in the SEC title game and they fall out of the top four. And instead, they're taking on Florida State, a team that went 13-0 this season, did everything they possibly could to get to the college football playoff, and they simply don't get in. This is a Florida State team that's going to have a lot of emotion heading into this matchup. A ton of storylines going into this one for both teams. Bound to be a wild one. We'll be over a full game preview and prediction on this matchup here today, but let's get started with their team trends. Florida State beat Louisville 16-6 to win the ACC title. This team is 13-0. They've overall been fairly dominant this season, have beaten some really good teams, but obviously the loss of their starting quarterback Jordan Travis was what the committee says to be the main reason why they were left out of the college football playoff. So obviously it's been just a really brutal ending to a great season for Florida State. This is a team that's got experience. Last year they really were on the rise and they found a way this season to get to 13 wins. But for Florida State to be able to take on Georgia in this matchup, Georgia being a team that was the top team in the country really all season. And I mean, other than their loss to Alabama 24-27, Georgia really was an incredible team this year. Look at the way this team played against their best opponents. The way they beat Tennessee 38-10, beat Ole Miss 52-17, a team that's now in the New Year's Six, beat Missouri, a team who's also in the New Year's Six. I mean, this is a team that's had dominance this season. They just tripped up in that game against Alabama, and it turns out this team went 12-1 this season, and they dropped from 1-6 just because of the SEC title game. So I mean, obviously for the last year of the 4-team playoff, you couldn't have imagined a more chaotic scenario here. But games be on Saturday the 30th in Miami Gardens, Florida, and the kickoff is 4 p.m. Eastern. Spread's going to win Georgia by 16.5 here. Georgia is a very heavy favorite. This is something that you never see in a New Year's Six game, seeing such a heavy favorite. Maybe if you got a group of 5 team in the matchup, but this is a matchup between two teams that have had incredible seasons. Obviously, though, Florida State without their top 2 quarterbacks. It sounds like Rodmaker is in the transfer portal, so he will not be in this matchup either. It's up to Brock Glenn, who is the third-string quarterback for this team, played against Louisville in the ACC title. So for Florida State being on their third-string quarterback, obviously that's brutal. The offense just won't be playing at the same level as they possibly could be, but the defense though for Florida State should not be underestimated. This is a really strong team defensively. But over under 44.5, the FPI is going Georgia as well, 61%. You look at the bowl history, Florida State 29-17 overall. They beat Oklahoma in the Cheez-It Bowl last season. Last game before that was 2019, which would have been the Sun Bowl. So obviously this team has only emerged just in recent time as a national contender once again. As for Georgia, 37-21 overall. They have won back-to-back national championships, obviously last season over TCU, and then back in 2021 over Alabama. And then back in 2020, this team would have been in the Peach Bowl, beat Cincinnati back in that season. Stat comparison, Florida State 14th in points per game, 7th in points allowed. Once again, this is a really balanced team. They're really strong defensively. Now, obviously, the offense has been the main question mark ever since Jordan Travis went out, but I mean, they put up 24 on Florida, which is less than impressive. 16 over Louisville is also less than impressive. But once again, you look at the defense of this team, the way that this defense has risen up the past couple of games for this team is extremely impressive, and that's something that shouldn't be overlooked. But obviously, you look at the offense, 43rd in pass yards games, 70th in rush yards. This team especially shines against the pass. So taking on Carson Beck and this Georgia offense that's overall been really impressive this season. I mean, you look at the past 3 years for Georgia, 2021, it was really about the defense for Georgia. This team was brutal defensively, maybe not so much on offense. 2022 was somewhere in between. And this season has kind of shifted to the offense for Georgia. Their offense has been incredible this year. The defense has been good, but it hasn't been quite to the same level. But, I mean, they're 12th in pass yards game in Georgia, 31st in rush yards. And overall, once again, a strong team defensively, 12th against the pass, and then 26th against the run. Your recent matchups, Florida State beat Louisville for the ACC title by 10. They beat Florida 24-15, took care of North Alabama, beat Miami by a touchdown, and also took care of Pitt. So, I mean, the strength of schedule, I'd say this team's best win is probably against LSU, beat them 45-24 back in week 1. I mean, but they also beat Clemson on the road. Turns out they turned out to be pretty good. They beat Duke, who was ranked 16th in the country back in October, by 18. I mean, that was a really impressive win at the time, especially. Duke turned out to kind of fall apart down the stretch after that game, so I feel like that's kind of what also took away from Florida State's argument for the committee, was the way that Duke kind of fell apart. And also, I mean, LSU was a good team this season. They didn't turn out to be a true national contender, and it really was in the end because of that week 1 game. But as for Georgia, they lost to Alabama by 3. They beat Georgia Tech by 8. Took care of Tennessee 38-10. Took care of Ole Miss 52-17. After that Tennessee game, I just had a feeling in my mind that we were going to see Georgia win their 3rd straight national title this season. I mean, they finally started to play some dominant football. They had beaten Ole Miss and Tennessee in back-to-back weeks, both extremely dominant. The Georgia Tech game was a little bit of a concern just because of how close it was, but I mean, coming off of those wins that they had, they also beat Missouri. That should not go overlooked, as Missouri turned out to be a really strong team this season, easily 2nd right behind Georgia for the SEC. So obviously, though, for the Bulldogs, losing to Alabama by 3, that one loss to the Alabama, dropping this team from 1-6. It's brutal, and it's just the way that this college football playoff turned out. Once again, it would have been perfect if we had a 12-team playoff this year, for it to be the first year this year instead of next year, because I mean, you got Florida State and Georgia. Florida State very much deserving of being top 4. I still feel like Georgia's a team that, talent-wise and the way they've played this entire season, they could be worthy of being top 4 as well. So I mean, just a lot of storylines for both teams. And so it's at least fitting that we get to see these two teams take on each other. But for Florida State especially, just a brutal and controversial ending to a great year. Finally being a national contender once again. And really simply, just because of Jordan Travis going out, this team just loses their position in the top 4. But it is up to Brock Glenn. I do think he'll be better in this matchup. I mean, he just simply put was pretty awful in the ACC title game. But he's also a guy that's young, doesn't have much experience. I think having a month in between the ACC title game and this game will help him to have a more impressive performance. But obviously, it's really going to come down to the defense for the Seminoles. And their defense rose up. Louisville's got a strong offense, and Florida State held them to 6 points. So Florida State's defense is proven, and that's obviously going to be a huge factor is how they can hold this Georgia offense in this game. But I mean, this is a team that's got experience, missing pieces obviously, but for Georgia, this is a team that's stacked overall. You got Carson Beck, you got an offense that has shined this season, and Carson Beck obviously being back for next year is going to be huge for this team. He's thrown for 3,700 yards, 22 touchdowns. He's a guy to really keep an eye on, I would say, for being a Heisman contender in 2024. But despite the Bama loss, this team should not be overlooked. This is a team that's really been strong overall this season. And overall in the regular season, this was the strongest team in the country. And I mean, Michigan was there as well, but Georgia, the way they played against Ole Miss and Tennessee and Missouri, just extremely impressive what the Bulldogs have done this season. They're a complete team that is brutal to beat, bottom line for Georgia. And so with that, let's get the prediction here for Georgia and Florida State coming up here in the Orange Bowl. And in the end, I am going with the favorite, just a matter of how much, and I'm going Georgia 27-17. I think we see more of a moderate to a lower scoring matchup here. I think Florida State's defense is still going to show up and really have an impressive performance. It's just the offense. Can this offense get anything going? And I mean, it's going to be tough for Georgia's defense is the strongest that Florida State has faced, and it's not even that close ever since Jordan Travis went out. So for Florida State, I do think they find a way to keep it close because of their defense, but I think Georgia kind of finds a way to pull away in the fourth quarter and win this game by 10. I don't necessarily think this will be a blowout. The spread is, once again, 16.5 points towards Georgia. And honestly, look at the way Georgia played this season, other than the Alabama game. In the biggest games against the best opponents, Georgia always played their best games. They had such dominant performances over Ole Miss and Tennessee. I don't see this necessarily being the same game, though, because Florida State's defense is really strong. But I mean, I do think in the end, Georgia's going to win this matchup, and I'm fairly confident in that. I'm saying 55%, but I'll say 55-60. I think Florida State, too, will have a much bigger chip on their shoulder. This is a team that's going to have a lot of emotion in this game, given how they were treated by the committee. It's really just a matter of, can Florida State use that to their advantage as well in this game and take them over the top? I mean, overall in this match, if you look at it on paper, Georgia should be a heavy favorite, but in the end, I do think it ends up being a somewhat close matchup. But with that, let me know your thoughts and comments below on this matchup. Obviously, one with a lot of storylines going into it. I appreciate you guys watching as always. My name's Evan. This is All Sports Central. Stay tuned for more. We'll catch you on the next one.